Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Introduction. The origin of this book. I have little use for the past and rarely think about it. However, I would briefly like to tell you how I came to be a spiritual teacher and how this book came into existence. Until my 30th year, I have lived in a state of almost continuous anxiety interspersed with period of suicidal depression. It feels now as if I am talking about some past lifetime or somebody else's life. One night, not long after the 29th birthday, I woke up in the early hours with a feeling of absolute dread. I had woken up with such a feeling many times before, but this time it was more intense than it had ever been. The silence of the night, the vague outlines of the furniture in the dark room, the distant noise of passing train, everything felt so alien, so hostile, and so utterly meaningless that it created in me a deep loathing of the world. The most loathsome thing of all, however, was my own existence. What was the point in continuing to live with this burden of misery? Why carry on with this continuing struggle? I could feel that a deep longing for annihilation, for non existence, was now becoming more stronger than the instinctive desire to continue to live. I cannot live with myself any longer. This was that thought kept repeating itself in my mind. Then suddenly I became aware of what a peculiar thought it was. Am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me, the I and the self, that I cannot live with. Maybe I thought only one of them is real. I was so stunned by this strange realization that my mind stopped. I was fully conscious, but there were no more thoughts. Then I felt drawn into what seems like a vortex of energy. I was a slow movement at first and then accelerated. I was gripped by an intense fear and my body started to shake. I heard the word resist nothing as if spoken inside my chest. I could feel myself being sucked into a void. It felt as if void was inside myself rather than outside. Suddenly there was no more fear, and I let myself fall into that void. I have no recollection of what happened after that. I was awakened by the chirping of a bird outside the window. I had never heard such a sound before. My eyes were still closed, and I saw the image of precious diamond. Yes, if a diamond could make a sound, this is what it would be like. I opened my eyes. The first light of the dawn was filtering through the curtains. Without any thoughts, I knew that there is infinitely more to light than we realize. The soft luminosity filtering through the curtains was love itself. Tears came into my eyes. I got up and walked around the room. I recognized the room, and yet I knew that I had never truly seen it before. Everything was fresh and pristine, as if it had just come into existence. I picked up thing, a pencil, an empty bottle, marveling at the beauty and aliveness of it all. That day I walked around the city in utter amazement at the miracle of the earth, as if I had just been born into this world. First, for the next 5 months, I lived in a state of uninterpreted deep peace and bliss. After that, I diminished somewhat in intensity, or perhaps it just seemed to be because it became my natural state. I could still function in the world, although I realized that nothing I ever did could possibly add anything to what I really had. I knew, of course, that something profoundly significant had happened to me, but I didn't understand it at all. It wasn't until several years later After I had read spiritual text and spent time with a spiritual teacher, that I realized that what everybody was looking for had already happened to me. I understood that the intense pressure of suffering that night must have forced my consciousness to withdraw from the identification with the unhappy and deeply fearful self, which is ultimately a fiction of mine. This withdrawal must have been so complete, so so complete that this false suffering self immediately collapsed, just if a plug had been pulled out of an inflatable toy. What was left then was my true nature as the ever-present I am consciousness in its pure state prior to identification with form. Later I also learned to go into the inner timeless and deathless realm that I had originally perceived as a void and remained fully conscious. I dwelt in states of such indescribable bliss and sacredness that even the original experience I had just described pales in the comparison. A time came when, for a while, I was left with nothing on the psychological plane. I had no relationship, no job, no home, no socially defined identity. I spent almost 2 years sitting on park benches in a state of the most intense joy. But even the most beautiful experience come and go. More fundamental, perhaps, than any experience is the undercurrent of peace that had never left me since then. Sometimes it is very strong, almost palpable, and others can feel it too. At other times, it is somewhere in the background, like a distant melody. Later, people would occasionally come up to me and say, I want what you have. Can you give it to me or show it me to get it? And I would say, you have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise. That answer later grew into the book that you are holding in your hand. Before I knew it, I had an external identity again. I had just become a spiritual teacher. The truth that is within you. This book represents the essence of my work, as far as it can be conveyed in words, with individuals and small group of spiritual seekers during the past 10 years. In Europe and in North America, in deep love and appreciation, I would like to thank those exceptional people for their courage, their willingness to embrace inner change, their challenging questions, and their readiness to listen. This book would not have come into existence without them. It belongs to what is as yet a small but fortunately growing minority of the spiritual pioneers, people who are reaching a point where they become capable of breaking out of inherited collective mind patterns that have kept humans in the bondage to suffering for eons. I trust that this book will find its way to those who are ready for such radical inner transformation and so act as a catalyst for it. I also hope that I will reach many others who will find its content worthy of consideration, although they may not be ready to fully live or practice it. It is possible that a later time the seed that was sown when reading this book will merge with the seed of enlightenment that human being carries within, and suddenly that seed will sprout and come alive within them. The book in its present form originated, often spontaneously, in the response to the question asked by individuals in seminars, meditation classes, and private counseling sessions, and so I have kept the question answers format. I learned the received I learned and received as much in those classes and sessions as the questioners. Some of the questions and answers I wrote down almost verbatim. Others are generic, which is to say I combined certain type of questions that were frequently asked into one and extracted the essence from the different answers to form one generic answer. Sometimes in the process of writing an entirely new answer came that was more profound or insightful than anything I had ever uttered. Some additional questions were asked by the editor so as to provide further clarification of certain points. You will find that from from the first to the last page, the dialogues continuously alternate between two different levels. On one level, I draw your attention to what is false in you. I speak of the nature of human unconsciousness and dysfunction as well as its most common behavioral manifestation, from conflict and relationship to warfare between tribes and nations. Such knowledge is vital, for unless you learn to recognize the false as not you, there can be no lasting transformation, and you would always end up being drawn back into illusion and into the some form of pain. On this level, I also show you that not to make that which is false in you into a self and into a personal problem, for that it how the false perpetuates itself. But another level, I speak of profound transformation of human consciousness, not a distant future possibility, but available now. No matter who or where who you are shown how to free yourself from enslavement to the mind, enters into the enlighten the state of consciousness and sustain it in everyday life. On this level of book, the words are not always concerned with transformation, but often designed to draw you into this new consciousness as you read. Again and again, I endeavored to take you with me into that timeless state of intense conscious presence in the now, so as to give you a taste of enlightenment. Until you are able to experience what I speak of, you may find those passages somewhat repetitive. As soon as you do, however, I believe you will realize that they contain a great deal of spiritual power, and they may be for you the most rewarding part of the book. Moreover, since every person carries the seed of enlightenment within, I often address myself to the knower in you who dwells behind the thinker, and the deeper self that immediately recognizes spiritual truth, resonates with it, and gains strength from it. The pause symbol, like Bill, after certain passages in a suggestion that you may want to stop reading for a moment, become still, and feel and experience the truth of what has just been said. There may be other places in the text where you do this naturally or spontaneously. As you begin reading the book, the meaning of certain words, such as being or presence, may not be entirely clear to you at first. Just read on. Questions or objections may occasionally come into your mind as you read. They will probably be answered later in the book, or they may turn out to be irrelevant as you go more deeply into the teachings and into yourself. Don't read this, don't read this, don't read don't read with the mind only. Watch out for any feeling response as you read and a sense of recognition from deep within. I cannot tell you any spiritual truth that deep within you don't know already. All I can do is just remind you of what you have forgotten, living acknowledge, ancient and yet ever new, is then activated and released from within every cell of your body. The mind always wants to categorize and compare, but this book will work better for you if you do not attempt to compare its terminology, with that of the other teachings, otherwise, you'll probably become confused. I use words such as mind, happiness, and consciousness in the ways that do not necessarily correlate with the other teachings. Don't get attached to any word, they are just stepping stones to be left behind as quickly as possible. When I occasionally quote the words of Jesus or Buddha from A Course in the Miracles or from the other teachings, I do so not in order to compare, but to draw your attention to the fact that in essence there is and always has been only one spiritual teaching, although it comes in many forms. Some of these forms, such as the ancient religions, have become so overlaid with extraneous matter their spiritual essence has become almost completely obscured by it. To a large extent, therefore, their deeper meaning is no longer recognized and their transformative power lost. When I quote from the ancient religions or other teachings, it is to reveal their deeper meaning and thereby restore their transformative power, particularly for those readers who are followers of these religions or teaching. I say to them, there is no need to go elsewhere for the truth. Let me show you how to go more deeply into what you already have. Mostly, however, I have endeavored to use terminology that is as neutral as possible in order to reach a wide range of the people. This book can be seen as a restatement for our time of that one timeless spiritual teaching, the essence of all religions. It is not derived from external source but from the one true source within. So it contains no theory or speculation. I speak from inner experience, and if at times I speak forcefully, it is to cut through heavy layers of mental resistance to reach that place within you where you already know, just as I know, and I and where the truth is recognized when it is hard. There is then a feeling of exaltation and heightened aliveness as something within you says, yes, I know this is true.